Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to be recommending a ton of romance books based on your requests. So I posted to Instagram and my Patreon page saying, hey, in prep for a video, are there any certain kinds of romances that you are looking for? You can be as specific or not specific through requests. And boy, did you all deliver. And I had so much fun finding answers for all of these requests. So we're gonna go through them today. I don't know how long this video is gonna take. It might be a minute. So let's take a look at some of the romance recommendation requests I got and the books that I would suggest to fit them. Honestly, this is one of my favorite things to do. I don't do it all the time, but it is fun to try to find books that fit prompts. The first one, I'm gonna admit, is one of the hardest ones that I had coming up with, and you'll see why. I need a beach sport romance for a reading prompt. Any beach sport is fine, but preferably not a second chance romance. Okay, so I am not a big sports romance reader in the first place, and then thinking about what are beach sports was a question. I did come up with two suggestions. They might be a little bit of a stretch, but this was the best I could do. So my first suggestion is Witchful Thinking by Celestine Martin. This is a cozy small town paranormal romance that I thought was really fun and really cute, but the hero is a merman who goes swimming in the ocean. Can we consider ocean swimming a beach sport? I'm counting it. So that is my first recommendation for this one. My other suggestion is The Girl Next Door by Chelsea M. Cameron. This is a very low stakes, chill, sapphic romance between two girls who kind of knew each other growing up. One of them left and is now back, and they're living next door to each other and they fall for each other. One of the women is a fisherwoman. So she goes out and catches fish on a boat on the ocean. And I think maybe fishing or sailing could count as a beach sport. It's the best I've got, so hopefully that helps. Sorry if it's not exactly what you're looking for, but that was the best I could do for that one. Most of the other ones I think I did better. I'm always looking for low angst, steamy reads with a great emotional connection between the characters. This one was a no-brainer for me. It was one of my favorite books last year, and it is in fact very low angst between the couple. All the drama is external to them. It is quite steamy. They have a great emotional connection, and that is Only for the Weak by Natasha Bishop. This is so good. I love it. It has a new cover that looks like this because it was indie published and got picked up traditionally, which I love. This follows a couple who are part of a wedding party at a destination wedding, and the bride is the heroine's sister who is marrying her ex. So it's hella messy externally to the couple. She and one of the groomsmen make a deal to have a no strings attached hookup thing going for the week, but he falls hard and fast for her, takes care of her, treats her amazingly, and it's great. So there's lots of external drama, but not internally, and it is quite steamy. I love it, definitely recommend. Next up, we have someone asking for rom-com and paranormal romance recs. So of course I have some, and you're gonna get more throughout the course of this video because some of these books will overlap with other questions. A paranormal series that doesn't get talked about enough that I love is the Parasol Protectorate series. This is book one, Soulless by Gail Carriger. These are historical paranormal romances with a little bit of a steampunk vibe and a mystery element to them, and they're delightful, especially if you like kind of a sassy, prickly heroine. Our main character is a spinster, and she ends up falling in love with an alpha werewolf, and there's also a mystery element to it. So I love these. I definitely would recommend them. Next is a book that I actually just finished. We read this for our Patreon and channel member book club this month, but The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love by India Holton. This is delightful, and I'll say it reads, I think, similarly to the Parasol Protectorate in terms of having kind of funny tongue-in-cheek humor and banter. The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love is a historical fantasy romance set in an alternate kind of fantasy version of early 1900s England, following ornithologists who are searching for a rare magical bird, and two of them fall in love along the way. But it's kind of a rigged game, and it's very funny. I loved it. It is entirely unserious, definitely rom-com territory, but also has fantasy elements. My final suggestion for a book that is both paranormal and a rom-com is the Mead Mishap series by Kimberly Lemming. The first one is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. These are, again, just silly, tongue-in-cheek kind of humor, but really cute romances as well with a paranormal element to them. And in this case, we have a spice trader named Cinnamon who had a quiet life with her cat, and it all gets turned upside down when she accidentally saves a demon and then falls in love with him. And I think they're really fun. If the humor works for you, these are great. If the humor works for you, I think you'll enjoy them. I feel like all three of the books that I'm recommending here have a similar sense of humor to them, so if that is your sense of humor, you may really enjoy them. The next request was for speculative romance that is slow burn, preferably queer in some way. Spice is fine as long as it isn't the bulk of the romance plot. I have two suggestions for you, and I adore both of these books. I hope maybe you'll enjoy them too. The first one is Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This is a sci-fi romance with a political marriage of convenience between two men, and it has a mystery element to the plot as well. There is a little bit of spice, but not a whole lot. There's a lot more plot and a lot more slowly building development of a relationship between these two characters who have their own pasts to reckon with. One of them is widowed and is still grieving the loss of his husband, but it had also been an abusive relationship, so he's working through that. And I just adored this. The way that they come together by the end is so beautiful. There's so much yearning. It's very slow burn. It's incredible. If you haven't tried Winter's Orbit, highly recommend. And my other suggestion for this is A Taste of Golden Iron by Alexandra Rowland. This is a super slow burn queer romance between a prince and his bodyguard. It has so much yearning, set in a fantasy world, and I just, like, you want them together so much by the end. Again, not a whole lot of sex scenes in it. It takes quite a while to get there. It's one of those books where one of the most memorable sensual scenes is one of them washing the other person's hair, where it's not overtly sexual, but there's just so much in it. It's so good. I love this book so much, and I think it also does a really good job with the power dynamics in a situation that could be a little bit questionable. Oh, and I should say this one also deals with mental health issues really well. So one of the main characters has panic attacks, and it's dealing with that kind of mental health rep. Speaking of A Taste of Golden Iron, my next request actually referenced that book in it. I'm looking for a fantasy romance, either FF or MM, that gives the same yearning and relatively low stakes but still fun vibes that A Taste of Golden Iron gave. I'm gonna be honest with you, that is gonna be hard to replicate exactly, but I do have three suggestions that I think get us part of the way there in different ways. One that you might want to check out is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. This one is more of a cozy fantasy, but it does have a slow burn sapphic romance in it. It's got a bisexual main character who is a painfully shy magical zookeeper. She takes care of magical animals, and it's great. It's got a whole other mystery plot to it. I don't think it quite gives you the yearning that you're gonna get in A Taste of Golden Iron, but you might still enjoy it, so you know, take that recommendation with a grain of salt, but I do think it's a really great book. My next suggestion is queer and does have yearning, but I wouldn't call it low stakes. So, this is In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. This is an upper YA fantasy that has queer characters, it's got polyamory, it's got blood magic, and it is darker. So this one is not going to give you the kind of like light fluffy vibes that you're going to get from A Taste of Golden Iron, but it does have a lot of yearning and queerness, and it is really good, and I feel like more people should read it. So I loved it. It's gonna be a little on the darker side though. My final suggestion for this is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsky. This is a gay historical fantasy murder mystery that is a bit of a slow burn. I feel like this might actually be the closest to what you're looking for. I feel like it does have some of that angst and that yearning. The stakes don't feel as high as they actually are. I mean, there are high stakes, but it has such a light touch to it that it doesn't feel that serious for the most part, and they're investigating a murder mystery. I really liked this a lot and I think it would be a good one to try. I hope those help. Next, asexual or aromantic romances would be grand. So I have a few suggestions for you. The first one is Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland. This is upper YA dark fantasy romance that is asexual. Not aromantic, but asexual. It's got a lot of interesting things it's exploring in terms of gender and sexuality and those things being on a spectrum. The main character was born with this magic ability to walk into people's dreams that she's sleeping close to. Her mother used this as a sex worker, but she doesn't want to be a sex worker because she's ace and has to figure out what this might look like for her. But it's also got a dark romance element to it that I won't get into. I loved this. I thought it was really mysterious. It was really well done. And it's a great version of that I think not a lot of people have picked up for it. I would also suggest trying Claire Kahn. She writes a lot of asexual characters. Her debut was Let's Talk About Love, which is a YA romance with an asexual main character. She's written a couple other YA books, and I know she has an adult romance out. I have not read it, so I can't speak to that, but I think she's doing some really groundbreaking work in terms of having ace characters of various sorts, which could be interesting. The other thing that you're gonna find a lot more of in romance is demisexual rep. It can be a little bit harder to find representations of characters who are not super interested in sex, but demi rep you can find more of. One of my favorite examples of it, because you don't often get the guy being demi as you do in this one, is That Kind of Guy by Talia Hibbert. This is one of her older indie published books and it's so great. If you're somebody who doesn't want sex on the page, this may not be a great recommendation for you, but if you don't mind it, I found this to be really good. It's a little bit of an age gap romance with an older woman and a younger man, but he is like still in his late 20s, and it is a little bit of a slow burn. He is demisexual and I ate it up. I thought this was fantastic. So hopefully one of those works out for you. The next request was for romance with older characters, like at least 35 and up. I feel like so many romances are characters in their 20s. So one thing to note is I actually have a whole shelf on my Goodreads, which is linked down below, for romances with characters who are 30 and up, but I'm gonna give you a few specific suggestions with characters on the oldest end of that spectrum that I think are great. First up was my favorite romance 2 years ago. This is Role Playing by Kathy Yardley. This is delightful. The characters are 48 and 50 and they meet playing a online role-playing game, but they each think the other person is a different age than they are, and they end up falling for each other. It is a wonderful, super slow burn romance with a bisexual and demisexual hero, which I think is cool. You don't get that a whole lot. And it's just wonderful. Our heroine is divorced and has a son who just went off to his first year of college, so she's just dealing with different things in life, and it was so good. I loved this romance so much, so highly recommend Role Playing. It's a great one. My other two suggestions are both sapphic historical romances. First is The Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows by Olivia Waite. This is a super slow burn historical romance between a woman who is a widow with adult children and a spinster beekeeper who become friends and very slowly fall in love. It is lovely. It is so lovely, and you learn things about beekeeping and printmaking along the way. Absolutely adored this, and these characters again are probably like in their 50s. And then lastly, the romance I want to suggest with the oldest characters of all of them, they are 73 and 69, is Miss Martin's Incomparable Adventure by Courtney Milan. This is a historical romance novella. It is a rom-com and it is very entertaining. So again, we have a widow who is in her 70s and we have a woman who is dealing with a terrible nephew that they're searching around London for, and they fall in love along the way. It is so great. I loved it. So I think there are absolutely books out there with older characters and romances. You just kind of have to look for them, but those are three of my best suggestions. The next request was for paranormal romance or very slow burn with a kicking your feet payoff. Okay, I have a few recommendations for you, and these might also fit in other categories of requests. The first one is a book that is coming out next month that I read early and I love it so much. This is The Spirit Collection of Thorn Hall by J. Ann Thomas. It is a contemporary gothic that gives Jane Eyre vibes. If you want a paranormal romance with ghosts, lots of angst and longing, a great relationship between the characters where the things keeping them apart are external to their relationship. This is a really good one. Super slow burn, but the payoff is like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. So our heroine is this young woman who has grown up in this haunted estate that she is tied to, and she can't really leave. So even though it's set in the contemporary world, in that estate, they don't have a lot of modern technology. They haven't updated things in the last 100 years. She has to wear clothing that has been on the estate for like 100 years that are uncomfortable and falling apart. And she has never really wanted something for herself. She has an abusive family, and dealing with the ghosts is difficult. Until one day, the son of their contractor comes to work with his dad. He's successful in his own right, has his own business and stuff. And there is an immediate attraction between the two of them. And for the first time, she begins to want something for herself. But everything is trying to keep them apart. Oh, it's so good. Like the angst, the longing, like it's incredible. Highly recommend. My next suggestion is technically book 3 in a series. I think the whole series is good and a lot of people would like it, but this book is the one that is paranormal, slow burn, really great payoff, and that is Caressed by Ice by Nalini Singh. This is book 3 in the Changeling series. It is a paranormal sci-fi romance set in a future Earth where humans have sort of diverged into 3 different streams. There's regular humans, there's the Psy who have these powerful psychological powers but feel like they have to have no emotion, and then the changelings who are essentially like shifters. There's political macro plot things happening in these. They usually have some kind of a mystery plot engine to them, but this one is so good. Really amazing, super slow burn romance with paranormal elements and a great payoff with the romance between the characters. So I loved it. I recommend the whole series, but this one I think fits the bill for what you're looking for. Another suggestion, although this one is more of a fantasy than a paranormal, is Rain and Ruin by J.D. Evans. This is an incredible blend of fantasy and romance. It's super slow burn. It has an amazing payoff. There's a lot of political stuff going on in it. Not enough people have read this. It's so good, and there's more books in the series. I need to keep going, honestly. But yeah, it's kind of a loosely Middle Eastern inspired world, interesting magic system, good world building, great character development, really good. Love it. My final suggestion, can you tell that I like books like this? I have a lot to suggest. My final suggestion for this one is Radiance by Grace Draven. This is another super slow burn romance with an incredible payoff at the end. This follows 2 characters who are going to be in a political arranged marriage, and they are of different species and initially are physically kind of repulsed by each other, but they're nice people. They try to make the best of it. They slowly become friends, and then they fall for each other and it turns into something more. It is beautiful, incredible, beautiful, slow burn, political, marriage of convenience to friends to lovers. Can't say enough good things about it. Next request said, let's go harder. Poly romance with more romance than spice. And I have a suggestion for you, actually. My recommendation for this is Triple Sec by TJ Alexander. This is a polyamorous romance that I think is doing a lot to try to teach people about ethical contemporary polyamory, and there's a lot of character development. There's a lot of focus on the romance and the logistics of making the relationship amongst these people work when it starts out as being between 2 of them, and then eventually the third partner is added in. So I think it's just really well done. We've got a long-term existing partnership that are polyamorous. One of them is trans. The other main character whose perspective we're in for this is a queer bartender who kind of wants nothing to do with love because she was hurt by her ex, and she also is trying to make something of herself, so she gets into this like cocktail competition, so you get a lot of like mixology stuff woven in. I thought this was excellent. More romance, more plot and character development than there is spice, but there are some spicy scenes as well. Next up is rom-com. I enjoy good banter. So I have a couple of recommendations for you if you love some good banter in your rom-com. My first one is a book that just came out. I don't have a physical copy of it yet because I'm going to be getting it in a couple of weeks, but this is Tropical Rebel Gets the Duke by Adriana Herrera. It is book 3 in a fantastic series set in Belle Epic Paris with Afro-Latine heroines. This one follows a doctor who is a spitfire who is running underground women's health clinics in late 1800s Paris, including doing illegal abortions. And the hero is a black duke who can match her energy and tries to get her to actually take care of herself when she is resistant to doing it, and the banter between them is excellent. This one does have more serious topics, but it is also, I think, exactly the kind of romance that I want to see in 2025. The way everything is handled is excellent, but there is also comedy woven in. There's great banter, and I just want to rave about this book, so I recommend it. Another really good one for this is The Nightmare Before Christmas by Sarah Rosh. It is a forbidden romance between the Prince of Christmas and the Prince of Halloween. It's hilarious, it has great banter, it's very swoon-worthy. I loved it, definitely would recommend this. And then my final suggestion, which I'm also going to suggest for another request coming up soon, is Tastes Like Shocker by Nisha Sharma. This is hilarious. It is a contemporary South Asian retelling of Much Ado About Nothing. And if you want good banter, look no farther than Much Ado About Nothing or like something related. I think this is so great. We've got a couple who don't really like each other very much at the start, but they're forced to work together planning a wedding, and there's a mystery of somebody trying to sabotage this wedding, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. I loved it. Excellent. Definitely a good one. Next up, I'm always looking for a good angsty, yearning, feel your gut twist and cry a bit romance. Sadly, outside fanfic, I haven't encountered much so far. Okay, I have a book for you. So much yearning will probably make you cry. This is How to Stay by Christina Mitchell. It's an indie published book, and like, oh my God. So this is childhood friends to lovers, but the heroine left town years ago after sleeping with the hero for the first time and is now back in town because of a family death. She'd been estranged from her parents. She's been through a lot. She's got a lot of baggage she's carrying. The hero was a fat kid and has now lost weight, but is still dealing with like disordered eating and his sense of self-worth and body image, which I have never seen a book do this before. I was so impressed by it. As somebody who's been in a situation of having at one point lost a ton of weight and still feeling uncomfortable in your skin and having disordered eating when people are praising you, I think that this is such an important thing to talk about, and it's especially not talked about with men very much. They both have so much baggage they're working through, but also their romance is so good and like, it's like painful, but in a great way. So How to Stay by Christina Mitchell, definitely recommend that one. The next request was for horror-mance. Yes, I have 2 suggestions for you that are great. These are both horror with a romance. They're great, I love them. My first suggestion is The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This is like a real dark take on The Little Mermaid, but like the sequel to The Little Mermaid, what happens afterwards. And it's dealing with transness in a way that's really interesting through horror, but there is a romantic element. It is dark and has body horror in it, but there is a love story in here as well, so that's my first suggestion. And then my other recommendation is a gothic horror sapphic monster romance that I loved and it just came out. This is But Not Too Bold by Ache Pueo. This was so great. And this one I would call truly much more romance forward, but also horror. And it is set in a kind of gothic estate following a character who is a maidservant to a mistress who sometimes eats people and is a literal spider woman. So yeah, it's great. It's real good. Loved it. I love that somebody asked for that because I never get to recommend things like that. So I hope you enjoy. Next request, another great one, a rom-com with a fat male main character. Yes, I got you. First one is More to Love by Georgina Kirsten. This is an adorable gay romance novella that is so sweet but also very spicy. So the main character is a fat gay man who I want to say is Asian, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think that's right, and the love interest is black. They have kind of a one-night stand situation that develops into something more. One of them is a teacher and a football coach, and it's so good. Everything you could want. Excellent if you're looking for a fat male main character, especially for a queer book. Another good one that's a novella is A Walk in the Park by Rebecca Weatherspoon. This was an Audible original. You can get it on Kindle or audiobook, and both the hero and heroine are fat, and it's really cute. They meet because of a dog, and it's just like a sweet little contemporary romance novella. I really liked it, not super spicy. And then my final suggestion is Shipwrecked by Olivia Dade. This is another one where both characters are fat, and this is part of a series that I adore. So they are characters who are actors. They had kind of a one-night stand situation. She left without a word, and now they are cast opposite each other in this Game of Thrones-esque show, and they're gonna be stuck on a deserted island for 5 years playing opposite each other, and they hate each other at the start, but you know, romance does develop. It's a slow burn. It's really good, very sexy. Both characters are fat, and the heroine is super comfortable in her body and confident, which I love, so it's really good. Also, this is one with a woman with body hair who doesn't feel bad about it and pushes to not have to remove it on screen, which I think is kind of cool. Next request is a BIPOC author with a grumpy female main character. I love a good grumpy female main character, y'all. So you know I had some suggestions for this. Although I'll be honest, 2 of my suggestions are by the same author because she does them perfectly. My first suggestion is what I already mentioned. This is Tastes Like Shocker by Nisha Sharma, her Much Ado About Nothing retelling. You know it. We've got a South Asian author, we've got a grumpy female main character and a grumpy male main character. I am here for it. It was great. And then my queen of doing a good grumpy female main character is Talia Hibbert. She's so great. Wrapped Up in You is a holiday romance novella between longtime friends who are snowed in together with a very prickly, grumpy female main character, and oh, it is so good. So good. Cannot recommend it enough. And then the other one is A Girl Like Her, which is also just so delightful. We have an autistic, grumpy female main character who has been in a relationship where she's been taken advantage of by somebody and kind of, I mean, honestly, sort of sexually abused. And we've got a hero who is just like the most cinnamon roll man who wants to take care of her, and they're geeky. She's like into comic books, and it's great. I love it. I love it so much. It's wonderful. She's like grumpy exterior, super soft interior. It's great. Next request. Angst, but no third act breakup. Does it exist? It does exist. I have an incredible book for you, and it is this one, A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. I will be recommending this later for another suggestion as well. This is a super slow burn, childhood friends to lovers historical romance where the heroine is trans and doesn't, for obvious reasons with safety, doesn't initially reveal her identity to her friend. It is so good. It made me cry. It's beautiful. There is no third act breakup, but there is so much angst and longing, yearning. This is the one. This is it. It does exist. It's incredible. Next request, melodramatic like Jane the Virgin. Okay, I have a couple of suggestions. One of them is not exactly a romance, but it's got a romance in it, so I'm going to suggest it because it is like a telenovela. It is very dramatic. Is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This is a modern lesbian classic that is historical fiction and super twisty. The way I gasped at some of the twists and reveals, it is a lot. It's very melodramatic. So it starts out following a young woman who grew up lower class in London with a family that does theft, and she gets pulled into working on a long con where she will pose as a maidservant to this wealthy heiress and convince her to marry this guy, and then they're gonna get her tossed in the insane asylum and steal her fortune. But of course she starts catching feelings for the lady she's taking care of. And then things go from there. And it is the most wild, dramatic, twisty, angsty book, but it does have a sapphic romance and it's great. I loved it, so I recommend that one. My other suggestion was an unexpected favorite of mine last year, and that is Paradise by Judith McNaught. This came out in the 1980s, and it is a epic saga of a romance that reads like a soap opera. This book is long, it's about 700 pages, but when I tell you I could not put it down because it was so engrossing, don't let it scare you off. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you just kind of what happens in the first less than 100 pages, right? Like, this is just the beginning of the book. So we follow a girl from when she's like 11 or 12 years old. Her dad is the owner of these big department stores, so she's an heiress. She grows up really wealthy, but because her mom left him for someone else when she was a baby, he is super overprotective and controls her behavior a lot, which doesn't go great when she turns 18, and in order to rebel, decides to lose her virginity to the person that her dad would disapprove of the most, who is this steel mill worker. And so they have a one-night stand, and surprise, surprise, she gets pregnant, because of course she does. So she goes to track him down. He says he'll marry her, so they get married. The dad is super pissed off, tries to break them up. He has to go to South America for a while for work, and while he's gone, she miscarries the baby, and he thinks she had an abortion. They never speak to each other again and get divorced, and then like 10 years later they meet, and he's now built this big business empire. And it goes from there. Listen, it's so good. It reads like a soap opera. It's great. I loved it. I was rooting for them. Highly recommend. The next one was hard, and I don't have anything that is a perfect match, but I did my best with vibes. And that is Gay, Strange the Dreamer. Now, I don't feel like I have anything that is a perfect match for this, but a couple of fantasy books came to mind that are queer and have that sort of mystical, dreamlike quality to them. The first one is probably the less good suggestion in terms of comparison to Strange the Dreamer than the other one, but it is a book that I really love and I'm gonna share it. That is Siren Queen by Nevo. This is not specifically a romance, although the main character does have romances through the course of the book. It's a novel set in a fantasy version of early Hollywood, and it follows a young Asian girl who wants to be a star on the silver screen, and she makes a deal to try to get this to happen. But what's interesting about it is that it takes some of the real history of early Hollywood with the way that studios controlled actors, the mistreatment of young women, especially young women of color, and then puts it in this fantasy world with fae magic and this sort of dreamlike quality. But we have this amazing fierce heroine who is a queer woman. She has relationships with other women through the course of the book. And it's got this kind of dreamlike quality to it. I loved it. I thought it was great. And while I don't think it's perfect, if you like Strange the Dreamer, you might enjoy this book as well. And then my other suggestion is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. And the reason I picked this is both books are fantasies that are about stories and storytelling, while this one is set more in a real world with kind of an adjacent magical world. It is still about the power of stories and storytelling. The main character is a gay man who finds his way into another world. And this is another one that has this sort of dreamy quality to the writing that's very poetic. I loved it. I think it's beautiful. It's the kind of book that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but again, if you like Strange the Dreamer, I feel like you maybe have a good shot of loving The Starless Sea. So those are my two suggestions. The next request was for human-alien romances and human-elf romances. So for human-alien romances, I have a couple of suggestions. Ice Planet Barbarian by Ruby Dixon is one that is probably well known in this alien-human romance subgenre. But I am actually going to recommend a different series by Ruby Dixon, and that is the Rizdaverse books. To each their own. The Ice Planet series was just not really my cup of tea, I feel like, because of the kinds of heroes, whereas the Rizdaverse series I like because it's mostly human women in arranged marriage of conveniences, which I just love as a setup, and I think her heroines are great. The one I would start with is The Alien's Mail Order Bride, which is a novella. It kind of sets up the Rizdaverse as diverse world. So that would be a good suggestion for humans and aliens. And that one I like too, because you've got kind of a cinnamon roll hero. It's just nice. It's like a nice romance. And then the other one I would recommend is Artek by Honey Phillips. This is the first book in 7 Brides for 7 Alien Brothers. And it is pretty delightful, to be honest. I need to keep going with the series, but I loved the first one. I think it's a fun homage to the classic film 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, but fixes some of the more questionable things in the original. It was great, and again, it's pretty short, didn't take long to read, but I really enjoyed it. For human and elf, and I'm gonna assume you mean like fae, like obviously you could do like A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas, but I feel like everybody kind of knows that one. My other suggestion, actually, now that I think about it, is not specifically a romance with a human and an elf, but I feel like it's kind of adjacent to that, so maybe this could work. I haven't read on in the series, and so it's possible that other books in the series do it differently, but Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater is this really charming historical fantasy romance about a young woman who is cursed by a fairy at birth to have half a soul, and her falling in love. It's very cozy. It's got a main character who reads as neurodiverse, which I think is really interesting. And I just liked this a whole lot. I think it's a great option. She doesn't exactly fall for a fairy, she falls for a sorcerer, but I feel like it's adjacent. So that was kind of my best suggestion. I didn't have a whole lot. The next request was childhood friends to lovers, but make it queer. And I actually read 2 of these last month. So I've got a couple of great recommendations for you. The first one is coming out, I think, in February. This is The Broposal by Sonora Reyes. It's their first adult romance, and it is childhood friends with a modern marriage of convenience so that one of them can get his green card because he's an undocumented immigrant and they're worried about his status. It feels very timely. One thing to note is that the friend who's the citizen has at the beginning an abusive girlfriend, and that abusive relationship ends up being a lot of the conflict as we get later into the book, but I do appreciate it that it shows a different light on what abuse can look like. The hero, who is undocumented, is autistic, so that's kind of cool, and he starts the book thinking he's straight and has kind of a queer awakening through the process, while his friend is bisexual and openly bisexual. So it's a book that is heavier at times with some of the subject matter that it's dealing with, but it's got this really lovely friends to lovers situation and this beautiful romance that I was rooting for. The other one that I read is Make My Wish Come True by Rachel Lippincott and Allison Derrick. This is a YA sapphic holiday romance that is also childhood friends to lovers. One girl left as a teenager to go to Hollywood and became a big movie star and hasn't been in touch with her best friend in like 4 years, but now in order to get a role that she wants, she has to prove that she's got small town roots. And so she goes back and asks her childhood best friend to fake date her, to pretend to be her girlfriend. But of course, they end up falling in love along the way. This is really cute. It's got Hallmark movie vibes. They do all of the fun little small town romance holiday things, and it was really delightful. So I liked this, and both of those are great options if you're looking for queer childhood best friends to lovers. The next request was for bisexual main characters, and I'll be honest, there's a lot of these, and even in some of the books that I've mentioned already, we've had bisexual main characters, but I will highlight a few in particular. The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean, which I mentioned earlier, which is a cozy, sapphic fantasy romance. Really enjoyed it. This is with a zookeeper of magical animals. I loved this, and the main character is bisexual in that. For Never and Always by Helena Greer is actually also a queer childhood friends to lovers, now that I think about it. And the hero is demi and also pansexual, so I really enjoyed this. I think is really interesting about this book is a lot of times in romances, you've got the hero who's the one with commitment issues, and is like afraid to really fall in love and really trust the other person. But in this case, it's the heroine. She's the one who's been hurt, has been left behind, and needs to be taught that she can actually trust that somebody is gonna stay and love her consistently. This was great. It was really lovely, really emotional, and again, we've got a pansexual demi hero. Another great option is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. Both of the main characters are bisexual, and this is a gender-flipped retelling of When Harry Met Sally in novel form. It's really good. I liked it a lot, and I think it's interesting too because the ending of it leaves the door open for possible polyamory, so that's interesting. The next one is a little complicated, and I tried to come up with a couple of different suggestions that met different criteria from this. It says, these are all separate ideas. I don't necessarily want you to find a book that has all of them, although if you do, wow. About older people, an established relationship, does not have miscommunication, friends to lovers, dislike or enemies to lovers, Black, Indigenous, or person of color author, and genre blend. Okay, so one option for a book that does not have miscommunication and is friends to lovers is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall, which I mentioned earlier, where we've got a trans heroine and then a hero, and they were childhood best friends. It's a slow burn. It's not a miscommunication trope. There's no third act breakup, and the characters are a little bit older as well, so I think this is a really good one. The Bromance Book Club by Alyssa K. Adams is about older people with an established relationship. This is kind of a marriage on the rocks situation, but it's also a rom-com where the main character, him and his wife, are kind of having a tough time. He's a professional baseball player and he gets together with some of his buddies who are also professional sports players, and they start a romance book club, but bromance because it's all of them, and they take notes, and so he tries to use romance to help him fix his relationship with his wife. It's the start of a series, but this was a really good one, so that might be an option. For one that is dislike to lovers with a Black author, I'm gonna suggest A Duke by Default by Alyssa Cole. This is a really great slow burn romance with a modern day Scottish blacksmith and a heroine with ADHD who don't really like each other that much. It's super slow burn and it is delicious. I loved it. This whole series is amazing, honestly. The Reluctant Royals series, highly recommend if you haven't picked them up. And then lastly, for one that is about older people and is a genre blend that I can't say much about because it's a novella and it's real twisty, is The Headmaster by Tiffany Rice. This is great. It's like a twisty take on a contemporary gothic romance with older characters, and I can't say too much about it, but I liked it a lot. So if you like a gothic vibe, I would check that one out. So we have 2 requests left to go. The first one, I've got to tell you both of my suggestions for this I've already talked about, so we'll be quick. Queer romance, extra points for trans rep, non-contemporary setting, historical, fantasy, sci-fi, etc., with the slowest of slow burns. Okay, I got you. A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall fits the bill, and it has trans rep. This is queer historical romance that is the slowest of slow burns, and it is so good. And the other one that I have also already mentioned does not have trans rep, but The Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows by Olivia Waite. It is also very slow burn queer historical romance, so both of those I definitely recommend. I guess I should say A Taste of Golden Iron would also fit the bill for this. I mean, there's been a few things that I've mentioned today that you could pick up. And finally, I've already mentioned books that could fit this, but I'm gonna give you one bonus. This is sci-fi romance, and the one I'm going to give you is not sold as a romance, but it does have a romance in it, and I think it's great. This is a novella. It's called Hard Reboot by Django Wexler. I know it doesn't look like a romance, but this is a dystopian sci-fi novel with big fighting mech robots and a sapphic romance, and it's great. I loved it. So there you go. I promised you a whole lot of romance recommendations, and I think I delivered. So I hope you found something new to check out, and you know, we've got a lot of genres, a lot of different kinds of things going on here, hopefully something for everybody, but this was so much fun. So thank you so much to everyone who submitted requests for the video so that I had things to pull from, and I hope this was helpful. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts on anything I talked about in this video. And for your question of the day, if you have a great recommendation for one of these requests that I didn't think of, leave it in the comments below, because I am not the end-all be-all of romance, and there's plenty of stuff out there that I don't know about. This was just stuff I've personally read and enjoyed. Talk to me in the comments down below. If you like this video, it always helps if you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.